So I'm just getting that ready. Okay, so I suppose just bearing that in mind that we are recording the session. So you're more than welcome to join in the conversation in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourselves. But just, I suppose, bearing in mind that we are recording it and it'll be shared afterwards. But I hope you're all doing well. Today we are talking about sustainable high performance. So it's actually World Wellbeing Week this week. So I suppose that's an opportunity to share the I suppose the different ways that we can celebrate aspects of well-being, whether that's having meaningful, purposeful work, to having kind of, even financial security, to physical and mental and emotional well-being, to having good support networks, everything like that. Today we're focusing mainly on well-being at work. I think, often when it comes to well-being, there can often be a bit of a knowing doing gap, right? So a lot of us know what we could or should be doing to have better well-being, but we don't always make time for it, especially when we are really busy or we're really stressed, which is, of course, the times when we need it the most. So that's kind of what we're talking about today, is just a bit of a reminder on, how do we ensure that our performance stays high, that our energy stays high, that we don't burn ourselves out. So, I think I hear it a lot, like even, if I'm talking to clients and they'll say that, as soon as they go on holidays or as soon as things get a bit quieter, they get sick. Right. So it's they get a bit of a cold or they get unwell because they have been fueled by stress and that kind of high energy. And then as soon as the pressure drops, their immune defenses drop as well. I think it's quite a common problem. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that. So I suppose it's that kind of thing of, it's not the ideal, is it? So how do we ensure that we're not burning ourselves out or just running kind of on fumes, purely being you know, ruled by the pressure or the stress that we're under. So throughout the course of the day, or the next hour, we're talking a bit about both resilient thoughts and resilient actions. So there is a bit of a difference there, and sometimes we kind of focus on one or the other. So we'll focus on both of those. I will be showing you later a framework to better understand your own well-being and resilience and that of your team as well. And as well as that, we have some kind of points or tips or strategies from experts in the wellbeing field. So lessons learned that they've picked up along the way. So we'll be sharing that a little bit later. So just to kind of have us all on the same page, well-being is about feeling good and functioning well. And this is a definition from the World Health Organization. So as it says there, comprises each individual's experience of their life and a comparison of life circumstances with social norms and values. So well-being, it does exist on those two dimensions, subjective and objective. And as we say, it's really multifaceted. It includes things like health, work, education, social relationships, the natural environment that we're in, the way that our country is governed, work-life balance, housing, all of these kinds of things can contribute to our overall well-being. And, I think often we think of health playing a role in well-being, mental and physical health. I suppose mental illness and well-being are independent, right? So you could have, someone with a mental disorder but high levels of well-being, and vice versa. You could have low levels of well-being without having a mental health disorder. So that mental health, I suppose, is not just the opposite of mental illness. So again, really comprising all those different things: career, social, financial, physical. Mostly today we'll talk a bit more about the cost or the impact of well-being in the workplace. A couple of estimates there on the cost of poor well-being. Gallup estimates that there is $322 billion that is lost globally due to things like high turnover rates or lost productivity. So that's, I suppose, burnout being something that can be impacted by poor well-being. Gallup also estimates that 75% of medical costs accrued mostly due to preventable conditions, right? So it's all those things like the impact that stress has on our bodies. And also, I suppose, for example, if you are maybe having a poor work-life balance, you might not have as much time to make healthy meals or exercise or, do the things that allow you to be really well and healthy. So that's just an example. So they're estimating that there's a lot of kind of preventable costs happening. Deloitte as well estimate that in the UK, the annual cost of things like absenteeism, presenteeism, and turnover is in that 53 to 56 billion pounds. That was in the year 2020 until 2021. So there is estimates of quite a high amount of costs to employers and to individuals. I suppose the impact of well-being, it does extend far beyond just purely how people feel. We can see here, it does affect the number of sick days. It does affect job performance. It does affect burnout or the likelihood of leaving an organization, right? So again, these are costs in time and money for having poor well-being, or for not prioritizing well-being as much as we could. So I suppose it's and going back to that definition about feeling good and functioning well, I don't think we really need to labor that point of why this is important, right? Who wouldn't want to be functioning well and feeling good? So it's, quite a big cost, significant costs for not looking after it, and quite great benefits for looking after it. So I suppose the case is quite clear, but then it's just a case of, okay, how do we do this? And again, a lot of the time we know what we could or should be doing, but why aren't we doing it? So that's kind of what we'll be talking about today. So what I would love to do is get your input and just see how people are doing at the moment, right? So what I want you to do is, if you can get either your mobile phone or open a page on a browser. If you're using your phone, you can just scan that QR code that's there in the bottom left corner. If you are just opening on a browser, if you type in menti.com, and type in that code 76046292. And if you go onto that, you will be able to vote on this. So you'll be able to take part in this discussion. I'll give you a couple of minutes just to access that. But it's just, I suppose, for yourself, thinking, how often, how much would you agree with these statements? And we can see a couple of people are getting in there now. So the first one being, I have been getting sufficient sleep. And so we'll just think of yourself in the last month. Okay, so obviously well-being, it is very dynamic. It changes 1 month to the next, or 1 week to the next could be very different. But let's just think of the last month. So we'll say kind of the month of June. How much do you agree with these statements? Okay, so the first one is, I've been getting sufficient sleep for yourself. Second one, I have been doing sufficient physical activity. Okay, so it doesn't have to be going to the gym. It could just be, going for walks, just moving around a bit. The third one, I have people I can ask for help or support. Okay, so again, how much do you feel you agree with this? And this is all totally anonymous, by the way. So if you can get into that and see how much you agree or disagree with these statements. Do you feel you have people that you can turn to in good or bad times? The fourth one then, I have been eating and drinking healthily. All right. So again, for yourself, how much would you agree with that? Do you find you're kind of getting the fast food and maybe relying on caffeine to give you energy? Or do you feel you're getting, good quality, balanced meals in? The fifth one then, I feel I can take breaks and switch off from work. How much do you agree or disagree with that? Okay, so we can see a few people getting in and voting on that. I'll give you another minute. Hopefully a few more can get in there. So we can see there, vast majority of people on this call feel that they have been definitely eating and drinking well, getting good nutrients in, and most people feeling that they're able to take those breaks and switch off. The physical activity one is coming in as a bit lower, on the lower side. So some people feeling that maybe no, they haven't been getting enough activity in, maybe as much as they would like to. I know it's June, it's summertime. Maybe people are kind of relaxing, maybe taking a bit of a holiday, like taking time off and just winding down. But yeah, again, it's worth just checking in with yourself on how much are you moving, how much are you sleeping. Okay, so this is just sort of a quick check-in, mainly in relation to the sort of physical well-being and the aspects around the resilient actions or behaviors that you can do, right? So kind of fundamental to our well-being is how much we're sleeping, what we're eating, who we have around us, and do we feel able to take breaks and switch off, or do we feel like we're constantly on? Okay, so I'll go on to the next one then, which is similar to the last one. We've got 5 statements again. I'll put the same QR code up again, so you can hopefully get into that. And this one, it's a little bit more on the resilient thoughts. Okay, so again, think of yourself in the last month, and to what extent do you agree with these 5 statements? The first one, I can cope with what comes my way. The second one, I feel I have control of my future. The third one, I find it easy to see things from different perspectives. Again, to what extent do you agree there? The fourth one, I set goals for myself. And the fifth one, I believe in myself and my abilities. Okay, so again, you can scan the QR code or you can go into menti.com. A few people are putting their responses into that to see what extent do they agree with those statements. So you can see those results up on the screen there now. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on these just yet, but as we go through the next sort of hour or so, 45 minutes, we'll touch on why these kinds of statements relate to our resilience. So you can see there, I suppose, the more you agree with these statements, you're probably going to feel a bit more better equipped to deal with challenges and setbacks and change and stress. So we can see again, few kind of comments coming in there, a few responses coming in there. So a lot of people kind of on that third one, seeing things from different perspectives. A lot of people feel able to be a bit flexible with their thinking. We can see in that fourth one, 4 out of 5. So I set goals for myself. Do you have that sense of, a bit of a future focus, a bit of an awareness on your direction? That third one, I believe in my abilities, coming in at kind of 3.8. So again, it's skewed more towards the agree side. So a lot of people on the call kind of feel able to have that inner confidence, that bit of self-belief. The second one is interesting there. I feel like I have control over my future. And of course, there are a lot of things that we don't have control over. Recession or, inflation or war or, all these different things. We don't have full control over our futures. But having that sense of, well, actually, I can influence outcomes that will lead to, where I want to go in life. Feeling that bit of sense of control or feeling that you can influence outcomes in your life, again, can really enhance resilience. And just going back up to that top one, I can cope with what comes my way. Again, that feeling of I do have the resources that I need to be able to handle challenges. So those kinds of statements. So the more you feel you agree with them, the more you may be having those kind of resilient thoughts. I'm just going to come to the chat there, and I can see, Matthias, you were saying there about your ideas. So the part to switch off from work and anything else happening is so important for your personal wellness. It's not selfish to take breaks and to call it a day. It's essential for your personal wellness. Yeah, I would definitely agree. And that's a great point, that it's not selfish. And I think that, we're touching on there. Why do we not? Why do we maybe push ourselves? And maybe it's that we think we're being selfish. So prioritizing yourself is very important. Yeah, if you never take breaks or time off, you'll be penalized at some point. Yeah, exactly. It can absolutely lead to burnout, like you say there. It will probably catch up in the long run. And yeah, Matthias, you're saying there, I think regarding controlling the future, that can be a tricky one. You never know what can change. Hence why I focus on the things I can control, not what I can't. Absolutely. Yeah. So as we say there, there are a lot of things that we can't control, but having that sense of what can I control, what can I influence, can make us feel a bit more resilient. Okay. So excuse me. So what we can, as we mentioned there, there's resilient thoughts around how you think about a situation and how you think about yourself. And there's resilient actions, what you do, how you behave, taking action that helps sustain and enhance resilience. Those are kind of the two components that we're just talking about now. So again, the thoughts, how you think about yourself, how you think about stress, how you think about setbacks, that will impact your overall well-being. So for example, if two people experience a setback and one person perceives it as an absolute disaster and another person perceives it as a challenge that they can rise to, those two people will probably have very different levels of resilience or well-being. They'll probably have very different experiences of that setback. Okay, so how we think about something, how we think about ourselves and the situation really impacts that. And then the actions, what do you do to sustain the energy that's needed to face stress and challenges? Okay. Carlos, I just see your comment in the chat as well. If someone dislikes their job, it'll be different to feel well-being. Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you're feeling, not I suppose enjoyment is an element of well-being, being able to experience those positive emotions. And if we're spending 8 or 9 hours in an environment that isn't conducive to wellness or resilience, it can absolutely be really demotivating or demoralizing. So I suppose throughout this session, hopefully you might get some ideas of maybe some ways to enhance the ability to cope with maybe an unpleasant workplace. And or if you are maybe someone who's in a position of leadership or someone who can kind of make decisions and influence your workplace, there are going to be a couple of kind of strategies or suggestions there as well. Okay, so when we think of, the resilient thoughts, how do resilient people think about stress or challenges or change? Again, if anyone wants to put anything into the chat, what do you tell yourself to get you motivated or get you through a difficult time? And then resilient actions. What do you do? What do resilient people do when they're under pressure? What do they do when they need to manage stress? Okay, so feel free to jot down some ideas for yourself or pop them into the chat. It might help other people. So I've got a couple of examples, right? So again, resilient thoughts, it might be things like, I'm open to hearing new ways of doing things, right? So open to being flexible, not getting too stuck in your own ways or your own preferences. Reminding yourself, I've got through challenges like this before, right? You have got through 100% of the difficulties that you've faced in the past. Reminding yourself, that was tough, but I made it through, and I've built up skills to deal with this. Another thought that might help is, I know my values and my purpose. When we are very clear on what's most important to us, it can be easier to get through difficult times, because we can kind of power through and say, at least I'm working in line with my values and my purpose. And even though it's difficult now, I know where I'm headed or what my ultimate goal is. And then actions, things like, okay, I'm going to meditate, and then I'm going to be in bed for 10:30, working out how much sleep you need, what time are you getting up at, what will allow you enough sleep. Or I'm going to speak to my partner about my problem. Having a support network, having someone that you trust that you can be open with. Or I'm going to finish work at 5 p.m. today and go for a run, right? So setting that boundary, communicating it to other people, getting that physical activity in, right? So knowing where your boundaries are and what's really important to you, and building time into your own life for those kind of resilient actions. Might be worth thinking just to yourself, and feel free to share it in the chat as well. Which do you focus more on? Which do you maybe rely more on? Is it the resilient thoughts? Like, okay, I just need to, plow through. I need to have confidence in myself. I need to be optimistic. I know my values that will get me through. Do you focus more on that? Or do you think, okay, I can never, I'll never miss a workout or miss a meditation session, or, I make sure every night I'm getting enough sleep as much as I can. I suppose, do you focus more on these kinds of actions, or do you focus more on thoughts? Because sometimes we kind of have a bit of a preference for one or the other. So maybe it's kind of going, look, I know I have the strength to just power through, but maybe we neglect the actions sometimes. So it's definitely worth considering. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer to rely more on your thoughts or actions to get you through challenges? Again, just coming to the chat, what I do when I'm stressed is to stop, take a step back, think it through, and consider the situation carefully. If possible, I'll take a break, then I'll come back to it when I have calmed down. Yeah, I think that's a really good example of how to handle a stressful situation. Give yourself that bit of time, that bit of space to choose how you want to respond to that. So yeah, that's a great example. Something then that I did for this session is I reached out to a few different people who are all in one way or another either working in the wellness industry, or they're helping other people to improve their wellness, or they're just people who I suppose have spent a bit of time and effort kind of putting into feeling this developing their well-being, their resiliency. So I asked a few people, what is something that you wish you knew sooner when it comes to well-being? I wanted to kind of capture the different lessons that people have learned, and that might help all of us. And again, that question is open to anyone. What would you tell your younger self? If you could go back 10 or 20 years, what would you really try and tell your younger self? Something you wish you had known sooner. Maybe you only came to this lesson later in life. I don't mind sharing my own. I think one that I would tell my younger self is around, I suppose, accessing support from my loved ones would be, do it sooner rather than later when going through a difficult time. I think when I was younger, maybe I thought kind of, no, I want to be able to handle this all by myself. I don't want to burden anyone else, or I don't want to be perceived as, weak or a hassle, or, all these kinds of maybe negative things. I think maybe I would have thought that, when I was younger. And I think now I sort of trust my friends and family more to still love and accept me, even if I'm not happy all the time. So I think that would be something I'd try and instill in my younger self. And another one, actually, going back to what Matthias said in the chat, I think short breaks can really transform your day. In the past, I would have been thinking, no, I'm too busy. I need to work. I need to keep working. And then you get to the end of the day and you're exhausted. I think that now I'd be more inclined to just take a quick 5-minute break, just move around, maybe step away from the laptop and come back and my focus is much better when I do that. So rather than maybe taking longer to do the same task, I can get it done quicker. But I suppose, again, my younger self would have thought, no, you don't have time to take a break. You need to get through this. So it's kind of that thing of, working, I suppose, smarter, not harder, and not just plowing through when you don't have the mental or physical energy to do so. Um, so Alicia, I like your suggestion in the chat. Don't rush, do your best, as there's a time for everything. Yeah, I think that's a great one. Is you don't have to be constantly rushing, and just do what you can, do your best. It's might not be perfect, but that's fine. And then Matthias, what you wish you'd known sooner. You can create personal well-being by establishing healthy boundaries and stick to those, definitely. And there are always someone you can ask for help and advice. You don't have to or should not do everything by yourself. Yeah, I really like that. So, you can and should ask for support and help. And you can set boundaries as well. So let's hear from some other experts in the field. So Emma Early Murphy, she is the president of Network Ireland, which is it's a women's network. She's a business owner, so she's the president of Network Ireland. And what she was saying about something she wished she'd known sooner is that, and this has come up in the chat already, so that it's not selfish to prioritize my self-care. That actually you're helping yourself and you're helping others by prioritizing yourself. I wish when I was in my 20s, I'd understood the importance that mental and physical health has on your overall performance. It's fantastic to see so many supports and great expertise being shared now on why we need self-care for our well-being. So again, I really like that point that there's a lot of information now being shared, that she maybe didn't have access to when she was in her 20s, she's saying, so really maybe not realizing that until a little bit later, kind of going, actually, reframing it a bit to say it's not selfish. Then we have Brian Crook. He is the course director for a postgraduate diploma in workplace wellness. That's at Tangent, which is Trinity's IDEA workspace. So he's responsible for the program design and delivery of this workplace wellness postgrad cert. And he wishes he knew sooner that well-being means different things to different people, right? So that it's very unique. And that's echoed by the next person, Erin Shrimpton. She is an organizational psychologist and she's also a LinkedIn learning instructor. So teaching others basically, often around things like change management. But something that she wishes she knew sooner is that well-being is completely unique to everyone. So similar to what Brian said, you'll only find the answer by exploring and experimenting with what works for you. So again, really like that one, that it is very unique. There probably will be a little bit of trial and error. It's not just a case of seeing someone else getting up at 4:30 in the morning and going for a run, and then you just copy that. And maybe that's not the best solution for you. Maybe it doesn't really fit into your lifestyle, or it's not giving you the best possible benefit. Right. Like if you see someone who seems really successful, and you copy them and you think, oh, I'm going to, experience all the exact same benefits. That's probably not really going to happen. It's not actually the case. So it's exploring and experimenting with what works for you. Mark O'Reilly then is the founder of a company called Fit Vision. So he's a well-being and performance coach. Fit Vision basically, they run fitness classes for workplaces. They have other kind of well-being initiatives and leadership development. So it's aiming to build happy and healthy teams and leaders. And what he wishes he knew sooner was how multidimensional well-being actually is. So maybe he was focusing purely on the mental side or the physical side, and realizing that actually there's a lot more to it. So well-being allows us to sustain performance. And based on his experience, he finds that companies that are promoting well-being for employees are setting the bar. Leaders can play a role by having well-being conversations with employees and getting to really know them. again, when we know that well-being is so unique to each person, we need to know each person. As leaders need to understand what motivates people, what do they need, what do they want, what do they not like. So that's something that he's been seeing through his experience working with a lot of different companies. And one of the companies that he works with is Primark or Pennies. So we've got the Global Wellbeing Advisor at Primark, Aoife Delaney. And what she wishes she knows, and this kind of again is echoed from a lot of what other people are saying, is basically that it's not one size fits all when it comes to building a well-being program. So she's talking in the context of, as a well-being advisor, as someone who's creating this well-being program in Primark or Pennies, as us Irish people know it, but everyone else in the world is calls it Primark. So she finds that well-being, it's different for every individual. There are different preferences, cultural, intergenerational, workplace differences. Creating a cohesive message around well-being strategy is essential. But beyond that, I learned very quickly that too much structure around what a well-being program should look like can hinder progress. Okay, so she's found that if you're really trying to maybe be inflexible or stick to a really rigid structure, or again, just copying what another company is doing, that might not work for you. So she says the most important thing is listening to colleagues. That voice is always at the center of shaping the way forward. Right. So again, because it's so unique to people, because things are constantly changing, it's really valuable to be listening to people, actually asking questions and listening. And again, that goes for whether you're trying to, like she is, develop a whole well-being program, or whether it's just on a one-to-one basis with someone you work with, having those conversations, listening to people. And the next question that I asked them was, how do you look after your well-being? So I wanted to get a little bit of input from them. And just actually to go back to the chat, something else that Carlos wishes he knew earlier, that deadlines will be a daily pressure. Maybe I've considered another job. Okay, so it's even recognizing, your own preference for working. Do you because some people, love a lot of deadlines and they work really well under pressure, and a lot of people, it's going to detract from their enjoyment of their work. So, how much pressure or deadlines or stress do you want to be under? So yeah, as I say, another question that I asked them is, how do you look after your well-being? Again, pop it into the chat for your own thoughts. I'd say for me, how do I look after my own well-being? I think it is kind of a combination of things such as regular exercise, and then being mindful of how I think about a situation. So I try not to catastrophize, try to keep things in perspective, recognize that nothing is permanent, remind myself that I've got through worse things in the past and it worked out fine. There's been plenty of times where I've really stressed about, I don't know, say giving a presentation, really stressed about it, really worried about it. And then I do it and it goes well and everything's fine, and I come back to that then. I go, okay, I'm stressing about the presentation. Remember the last time, it worked out fine, put the work in, you got it done, it was okay. So I kind of reassure myself in that way. I suppose so it's having that sort of confidence in my abilities to get me through that. I've done it before, I can do it again. And I think for me as well, it's trying to make it part of my identity as someone who I can depend upon, that I am that person for myself, right? So everyone needs someone or some people that they have trust in and they can depend upon. And I have people that do that for me in my life, but as well as that, I can be that person for myself as well. So being someone that I know will show up for myself, that will get me to the gym, that will, kind of make healthy meals to fuel me, right? So anyone who has read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear will probably kind of have heard that idea before, of making something part of your identity. I'm the type of person who we'll say, looks after themselves. That will make it easier rather than, again, just trying to copy the behaviors of other people. Okay, so how do you look after your own well-being? Alicia, you're saying, can't agree with you more, Julie. I would add personal and professional development. Yeah, exactly. So feeling that you have that kind of continuous development, that sort of purpose, that you're constantly learning, that can be really, really valuable. So Emma said some of her things is that self-care is part of my routine, going for a daily raw walk, taking regular digital detoxes. I think technology, it's brilliant. There's so many benefits, but there are also a lot of downsides. And sometimes we need to just switch off. We need to close the laptop. We need to put the phone away. That because sometimes it can interrupt what we're doing. For example, time with family, as she says there. Keeping in my own lane, right? So not worrying about what everybody else is doing, not comparing yourself to everyone else. And she says diary management and closing out my day. So again, feeling in control of your day, not that people are kind of hijacking, with dropping in meetings into your calendar, and then actually closing it out and saying, right, I'm finished for today. Tomorrow, my top priorities are this, and now I'm done, right? Rather than it floating around in our heads. Brian relies on exercise. For him, he says, I never skip a workout. So for him, that's really important, is, giving that physical, I suppose, strength and energy by not skipping workouts is really important for him. Aaron then says, I rely on a number of well-being lifelines that I know work for me, like exercise, diet, human connection. But I have to make sure I am regularly taking a moment to check in with what I need in that day. Because not only is well-being unique to everyone, it's also dynamic. So what works one day might not work next. I think that's a great point, that maybe some days you do need to, get up and get moving. And other days, maybe, if you haven't slept well, for example, maybe you do just need to meditate, read, get to bed early. So maybe it's not trying to do everything, but it is figuring out what you need in that day, checking in with yourself a little bit. Mark then O'Reilly from Fifth Vision says that we can break well-being down into 3 key areas. So he would see it as personal development and health, career, and key relationships. And then he defines what success looks like in each of those areas and take steps towards that desired state. So again, just figuring out, what does success look like to him? Just because your manager gets up at 5 a.m. every morning to go for a 10K run doesn't mean that you have to as well. So what does success look like for you in those different areas of well-being? And then finally, Aoife says to prioritize time for herself every day. So maybe that's going for a walk, doing an exercise class, or even if it's just like watching TV, taking a minute to yourself. So she says, just like brushing my teeth or showering, it must be included in every day so that I decompress, right? So it's this daily habit. I acknowledge my limits, which has taken years to learn. Okay, so she's emphasizing there that this doesn't just happen overnight. You do need to learn about yourself. Being open and honest about how I'm feeling at work and when I'm feeling too stretched. Right, so recognizing your limits and then communicating those. And she says, suffering in silence is absolutely not an option. And through this, I find people around you will be more open with how they are doing as well. So it has that benefit of you're able to kind of communicate more openly. Okay, so we've been touching on, the resilient thoughts and actions. We've heard from a lot of people, both in the chat and these well-being experts. And in relation to that, there is a framework that helps us to understand resilience and well-being. And this is one that personally I like. There's a lot of different options out there, but I just thought I'd highlight this. So this is called the Workplace Resilience and Well-being Index, or RAW. And it captures, again, both resilience thoughts and actions. And so I sometimes use this with clients, be it individuals or teams, where they complete a short questionnaire and then they get a report which gives them details on where their strengths or areas for development might lie. So you can see kind of an example there of someone's results, and the results give a resilience gap, right? So we want it to be kind of at 100%. If you see those 5 areas, kind of like 5 different batteries, that are powering us. So we've got energy, future focus, inner drive, flexible thinking, and strong relationships. I'll go into a bit of detail just to explain what each of those mean. But it's just to show you an example of, say, for this person, maybe they aren't focusing as much on, say the energy side of things, so maybe they're not getting enough sleep or eating enough good food. Maybe they're really relying on, caffeine to kind of fuel them through, and they're not taking breaks, and they're finding their energy is dropping. Right. So this person could then identify that, and they could recognize future focus is something that maybe they really rely on to get them through, because you can see there it's a much smaller resilience gap. So just if this is something that you are interested in learning about more, if this raw framework is of interest, I'll happily send you a sample report if you want to see that, or we can have a call or an email or anything if you are curious about it in more detail, because I'm just going through it at quite a high level. So it has these 5 different areas, as we mentioned. So the first one is energy, and that is around your physical activity, healthy consumption, boundaries, and sleep. Okay, so it's really tied with those resilient actions that we talked about before. Right. So again, are you relying on sugar and caffeine to get you through the day? And I do hear a lot of people talking about not having energy or feeling low on energy. And it is not always because you're not sleeping enough. Sometimes that is the case. I know, again, I've been talking to people recently, and with the warm weather, like Ireland, we're not set up for extreme temperatures at all. So, we don't have air conditioning usually for most people. So, people are finding it difficult sometimes to sleep in the heat. So that can obviously have a knock-on effect on how you make decisions and perform. But it's not always just due to sleep. Like, to share my own example, I remember a few years ago, I was going through a phase where I was just really tired all the time. Like, I even went to the doctor to check, like, am I deficient in something? Is there something going on here? I didn't think I was stressed. But then I was really looking at my day, and I realized that there'd be work days where I barely took any breaks. I might have just ate lunch at my desk. And sometimes, maybe I would be speaking to people on the phone or Zoom, but there would be some days where I wouldn't really have much face-to-face interaction with people. So that was actually really drawing down my energy. And so I realized then, okay, I have to make a bit of a change there. So that's one of the pillars there, is about sustaining and renewing the physical energy to have the capacity to keep going. Okay, so not just kind of powering through, but actually taking those breaks, taking enough sleep, and getting movement into your day. The second one then is future focus. So having that sense of purpose and direction, that can help us get through difficult times without feeling stuck. So if someone has that sense of meaning, they probably have goals that are meaningful to them. They know what their values are. They also probably have a degree of, like we mentioned, a sense of personal control over their life. You can't control everything, but people who have this, they focus on what is within their control or influence. Things like their attitude, their words, their thoughts. They're conscious of how they can manage those and how they can influence those. The third one is inner drive, and that is about having sustaining the self-belief when times get tough. So feeling that I can manage this. I have the confidence, the motivation, the perseverance to get me through. So, I suppose it's being aware of what really drives you. What are you passionate about? And not the kind of, I'm really passionate about this, the kind of statements that maybe you put on LinkedIn or on a CV or on a job application, but, really personal, when you really feel passionate and in a flow. Flexible thinking then is about having an open and optimistic mindset. So that's again touches on what we said before. So being able to see different viewpoints and open to different or new ways of doing things, and keeping things in proportion, not having the all or nothing kind of thinking. So kind of framing it in a positive way. You may have heard that saying that, if we have a hammer, that every problem looks like a nail. So if you only have one way of doing things or one tool, you're probably not as open to seeing new ways of doing things or new solutions or methods. And then the fifth one is strong relationships, building open and trusting relationships and being willing to call on these for help and support. So I think the challenge here maybe is both the making the time to spend time with other people and then actually accessing support. So again, sometimes you think, oh, I'm too busy. I'm not able to make time to spend with people. But actually, again, if we are making that time, it can kind of sustain us and get us through. Accessing support, being able to sort of share what you're going through very openly, or spending time with people that make you laugh. Those kinds of things can really enhance your resilience. So just coming to the chat, Inner Drive is affecting everything we do in our life. Can recommend you all read Drive by Daniel Pink. Yeah, absolutely, Matthias. That's a good suggestion there. And another comment then, one thing that I find is often ignored in terms of well-being is that we are all different and we can do tasks differently. In the podcast Teenage Thoughts, I discussed with the host how pupils at school are being trained that everyone must do homework and tasks exactly the same. Those destructive habits, they're being taught at a young age. Yeah, exactly. So I think there is a lot of emphasis on kind of conforming or, all being the same when you're younger. So it's unlearning that then as adults and hopefully not teaching kids that they all have to be the same. I found particularly the Pomodoro technique and the Hemingway technique very useful to remain healthy, productive, and enjoy the process. However, they don't teach you this in school and often not in your professional life. I had to learn those things myself. I was happy to present those perspectives in the podcast. So that's great, Matthias. And if anyone wants to check out that podcast, Teenage Thoughts, sounds very, very useful and just relevant when you're saying there that we do all behave differently and learn differently. Okay. So if we move along then, because we've talked a bit about what you can do as an individual. But what about, and we kind of touched on this already in the chat, what about employers? So anyone here who can influence the way that the way that, organizations are run, it is worth considering those 5 pillars, right? So thinking about, say, for example, if you're a leader and you manage a team, how aware of those pillars are your team? Do they know the importance of those 5 pillars? Do they feel balanced and high performing? Because a lot of research would suggest that there is a lot of people out there who are not feeling balanced or high performing. They're not thriving. So it's worth considering, how do you encourage and set up your workplace for success? Because it's really, I think, as we're kind of learning, it's not one size fits all, as we've touched on, and it isn't just a nice to have that comes last. It's more that it should be embedded in practices. So some of the things to consider as an employer: what should someone, a decision maker or an organization be considering? Well, thinking about the rules and guidelines. Do they work for or against well-being? Do they encourage thriving in all aspects of well-being? Recognition as well. So first of all, recognizing someone's hard work, and then also recognizing well-being successes and celebrating those. Thinking about incentives then, do they inspire participation in activities that produce results? So how do we incentivize things? We touched as well on personal and professional development. So do you have development plans? And then if so, do they include well-being goals? Or is it purely performance and results goals? Is there room for well-being goals within that? Thinking about how you communicate about well-being as well, especially from leaders and managers. Is it consistent? Is it conducive to high-performing culture? Events, do they build awareness of well-being? Do they build awareness of kind of a culture of a thriving culture? Facilities then, considering, is it actually easy to move around your office? Is it easy for people to communicate and collaborate? Are they able to leave the building to go outdoors, or can they see outdoors? Those can also impact well-being as well. And again, having that degree of flexibility, I think that definitely came through from everyone's comments. Being willing to adapt and change your plans, recognizing that even if something is working today, it might not work tomorrow. There's always room for improvement. There's always ways that you can adapt and tweak things. Okay, so that's some of the things to consider as an employer. The way that the organization is set up, or the way that the system is set up. And then, as well as that, just coming down to leaders, right? So say again, you're a manager of people. These are some of the things that really need to be considered. I suppose it's really, don't assume that everyone is fine, that everyone is coping and everyone is even thriving. Try not to shy away from having those kinds of well-being conversations. So sometimes I find that leaders kind of feel, well, I don't want to upset someone, so I won't ask them about a problem they're facing. Or I don't know how to help them. So they shy away from those conversations. And I would say that, actually, if someone is upset over something and you can tell, you're probably just prolonging it by not addressing it. So do be courageous and have those conversations, being open, being curious, being empathetic, really showing someone that you do care will go a long way. And bear in mind that you don't have to fix every problem. If they are going through something difficult, you don't have to be the person that solves that for them. That might not be possible. You can prepare yourself by knowing where you can get additional support. Like, for example, if you are in a larger organization, you have an EAP, an employee assistance program, you might want to be aware and familiarize yourself with how they can access support. But you don't have to solve every problem. Try to model the behavior that you would like to see as well. So again, sometimes it is a case of kind of, in terms of well-being, it's sort of like do as I say, not as I do. Leaders are maybe not taking breaks or striving for balance. And then they expect other people to just do differently to them. And it doesn't always work like that. So try to model the behavior and celebrate the behavior that you want to see, ways of maximizing well-being within the workplace. And be aware of the pressure that your team is under. So do discuss workload, ask for feedback, ask about challenges or setbacks, trying to do so, I suppose, in an open, non-judgmental way, just figuring out what's in your way. How can I help? What's the workload like? How are you managing? And again, if someone says that they're doing great or someone says that they're really struggling, not kind of disadvantaging either person, not criticizing either person for whether they're doing really well or they're not. So trying to take a kind of non-judgmental approach, but just recognizing that everyone will go through stages where they are struggling or the pressure is on, or the workload is high. But if it's, I suppose, quite a consistent problem, then yeah, there probably needs to go back to what we said there about the rules and guidelines and the way that the work is set up. Um, so I'd say that's probably a big one for leaders, is just not assuming that everyone is doing fine, and trying to notice changes or signs that people maybe aren't doing as well as they could be. Okay, so that basically brings us towards the end of this session. I'm conscious it's just near midday now. Um, we are aware that lots of people are kind of taking a bit of a break. It's the summer months, so we aren't going to have. There isn't usually we have 2 of these sessions a month, so we'll be back more at the end of July. But so keep an eye out for the next, never mind the Buzzwords session. But you can keep in touch with us. We have a LinkedIn group, I have a mailing list. If you scan that QR code, you'll get access to everything you need. Basically, we have a resources folder. We're on Eventbrite, we're on LinkedIn. So do get in touch, and keep in contact. I like this quote that the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. I think that's just one way of kind of capturing what we said there today about, choosing how we behave and how we think. So thank you very much for taking the time out to join in the conversation and share your ideas and experiences. I know it can be difficult to make time to develop yourself, so well done for doing so. I'll hang on for another couple of minutes in case anybody has any questions or comments, but if not, if anybody has to drop out now, look forward to hopefully seeing you at any future sessions. So thanks very much.